that we need to take up before we bring jurors out?
Not from the state.
Judge, I will just put one thing on the record that I asked Mr. Foster about briefly. When there are, from a technology standpoint, apparently how they're working it, as you know, we've got a built-in system where we can put images, and you can direct whether or not they appear on the big screen or not. But the district attorney has structured his presentation, I don't mean to interfere with it in any way, where he is using the television monitor, and that operates off of a router that is independent, I believe, of the system that is internally equipped. So we are then at a disadvantage of being able to use it. So I'm going to ask Your Honor to, if I want to make reference, so that we don't have the issue yesterday. I was less concerned about standing and holding a picture than I was about what you brought up about jurors not being able to see it. So we could do one of two things. Either if, when I want to use one of those exhibits, I don't have control of that the state just stipulates they're going to put it on the screen when I need it, because they have control of that screen. Or in the alternative, send us a copy of that, a digital copy of that picture. We have them all on disk. If they give us the number, because they're on disks that the CCBI has designated numbers, and if they can tell us what number it is, we can do it that way. Or just email it to us internally. Anything they can do where we can put it up on the big screen. But if that's difficult for the state, then I'm going to ask Your Honor to order the state that whenever I want it, have them to put it on that monitor if that's a difficulty for them. I don't want to make it difficult, but I don't want to spend an ad nauseum amount of time starting to search through which one is on the discs.
Right. Any efficient process we can come up with would be fine. I'm sure that Mr. Fawcett, do you have any concern about?
The state absolutely can. Any of the state's exhibits they have can publish it back on the TV. And I think we were doing that yesterday afternoon. I don't know if Mr. Arbor knew that, but Ms. Elliott and I were like, should I put it back on the screen? And we did. We can absolutely do that. We don't have the ability to put it on that big screen. Now, I will tell you that there's certain prosecutors, judges, and lawyers that it would be great to have things on a big screen, but there are some implications on appellate cases of the state doing that too much.
Some people are worried about the size of the image and what prejudicial effect it might have on the defendant. If I thought it was going to have a prejudice on the defendant, I think everybody in the room knows I wouldn't be asking to do it.
So the state has structured theirs ahead of time a certain way, and we can put anything on our TV, we can publish that's our exhibit back on the TV whenever called upon. As far as number, they have a disc. My understanding is I don't have a specific number that they can then reference to figure that picture out, but we certainly can work together as best as we can.
Maybe at the break we can get our heads together. If you look at the disc, there actually is a CCBI number attached to each digital photograph, and if we can sort of figure out where they pulled it from, it should only be a matter of a minute at tops to pull it up and put it on our own monitor. But that, either way, if you'll let me put it up there when I need it, or some way where I can put it up there, I just don't want to be standing there and I don't mind standing. I just don't want to block the view of any juror.
I suspect the quickest way is going to be to simply, whenever you need an exhibit put up there, just simply turn to Ms. Lefevre and say, could you put State's Exhibit 16 back on the screen? And that's probably the quickest way. If you, for some reason, want it on the overhead, then ideally you would arrange that beforehand, because like right now the screen's not down, it's not warmed up, and that might take some coordination to get it there. But I think in general, if you just simply turn to Ms. Lefevre, she'll accommodate you.
That's fine. Is the court, by its designation, Ms. Lefevre, taking judicial notice of the fact that Mr. Fawcett is incapable of doing this? I'll point it out, because I don't know if I could either.
I'm not going to comment on the technological capabilities of either counsel.
I think Mr. Fawcett and I are the two most technologically challenged people in the room. So.
Right, that's duly noted. All right, and noting that the screen is not down right now, Mr. Foster, are you intending to use it this morning?
No, Your Honor.
All right, so we'll leave it like it is. Okay, if there's nothing else, let's go ahead and bring jurors out then. Back, and glad that the weather did not delay us this morning. We appreciate you being here in a timely fashion. We're going to resume now with further cross-examination of Officer Smith. Sir, do you recognize that you're still under oath?
I do, Your Honor.
All right. Mr. Arbor?
All right, thank you.
And if you could turn your microphone on, please. Thank you.
Good morning, Officer Smith.
Morning, sir.
We'll continue where we left off. I guess we were sort of at that crime scene. I've asked them to put the schematic up. But before I do that, there's a couple of things I wanted to recover with you about the necessity of doing reports. When you were taught that process at the academy, and maybe in some of your criminal justice classes as well, you were taught, get the important stuff in there, correct? Into the report.
Supposed to write what occurred, yes, sir.
Yeah, but I mean, anything that's important, because for all the reasons we talked about yesterday, to refresh your recollection, to let other officers know what you did, and also, you know, in case you called upon to testify, something like this nature, correct?
Yes, sir.
It'd be fair for me to say that, and I think you also mentioned this in your testimony yesterday, that when you're doing a report, you want to be particularly accurate when you know that the event is of some significance. Isn't that correct?
Yes, sir. You're supposed to write what you saw.
Right. But what I'm talking about is, and you made mention of this when you were talking, I think, about the ambulance ride. You remember yesterday telling me this was, I believe you said, the worst crime scene that you've had to deal with in your 10 years as an officer with the Raleigh Police Department.
Yes, sir.
And I believe you said that when you were on the ambulance ride with Mr. Broyhill and the EMS worker in the back of the vehicle, you were being very careful to make sure that you observed and listened to everything. Remember saying that?
I remember watching him for safety. At that point, I knew this was a serious crime. At no point was I going to, basically, unless I was told to ask something, I wasn't going to ask anything.
Right. You don't want to, and part of that is also some of your police training too. I mean, one of the things, and then we're going to get into that when we get back into the scene for a second. I mean, there's different phases of your job. A lot of times, like you as a uniform officer, you and the other uniform officers there, you're the first guys usually arriving on the scene. Isn't that correct?
Yes, sir.
The detectives and the investigators that come to these crime scenes are usually coming, I mean, they can go there in the beginning if they're near to a call, but most of the time when an event is happening, it's you guys, the uniformed officers, who are arriving at the scene first and having to deal with what needs to be dealt with. Isn't that true?
Yes, sir.
Because you're the ones in patrol. You're the ones in the car. You're the ones out there near where the crime is happening.
Yes, sir.
So when the call comes in like it did this day, and you're on, I think you said Falls of the Noose, you're like, okay, we got to get to the crime scene. Now, we're sitting in a courtroom. We're talking about this thing today, and it's sort of an antiseptic way of talking about it. But when you get a call like that of a stabbing, and then the call is, it's a pretty serious stabbing, this isn't like some, you know, you're just going to necessarily take your time, get there when you can. This is, you hit the overhead lights, put the siren on if necessary, and you get to the scene, correct?
Yes, sir.
And this isn't just you. This is all the cops arriving at the scene. And when I say, I apologize. I say cops. I've been saying cops for years. But when I say it, I don't mean it in a disrespectful way. All the police officers.
Whoever's available in close proximity, yes, will respond.
I just don't want you to take anything wrong by me saying the word cops. You've heard it before.
Yeah, you're fine, sir. No problem.
I think they made a TV show with that name. But anyway, so when you're going there, I mean, this is, you're going there with the concept in your mind. This is an emergency. This is a pretty serious stabbing. Now, you don't know everything, and in fact, you don't know a lot, right?
They gave us some information over the radio. They also sent it to our MCT, which is a computer inside our car that sends us typed information. But no, do I know all the specifics? No, just what's being relayed at the time.
That's part of the reason why they give you all this training, because that's one of the hazards of your job. Oftentimes you can find yourself being sent into something, and all you have is basically the thumbnail sketch of something going on, and you don't know till you get there exactly what you're getting into, correct?
We were given information. It's not always all the information, no.
Right, and sometimes the information being given to you is being given by people who have made calls in from a 911 call, right?
It could be third party. It could be people's involved. It can be multiple parties. Yes.
Yeah, and they're not calling you. They're calling into a dispatch center, actually to a 911 call center, who's receiving the call, right?
Yes, sir.
And then the 911 dispatch is deciding, what kind of a response this needs, and then from that, someone at the main station is dispatching units near to the location of Rainwater and Tealwood, respond, and immediately, stabbing in progress, something like that, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. So you get the word. You're going there. I'm assuming, traveling at as high rate of speed as you can safely without being a danger to others. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I was training, so
What's that?
I was explaining to him I was making sure he didn't go too fast. But yeah, we were
Oh,
getting
was
there
he
as quickly
driving?
as he was driving. So we were
Okay.
going as quickly as possible.
Probably at that moment, that car, you're probably thinking, I wish I was driving the car right now.
A little bit, yes.
When you get there, and you pointed out, you parked your car down near that southeast corner of the intersection. You can look if that helps.
When we stopped, I was pretty much in the intersection of Rainwater and Tealwood, or Rainwater and Tilbriar.
Like right in the middle of the road.
Essentially, yes.
And you know that the stabbing, and you've seen other police cars there. Typical police procedure would be, if you've got some kind of a violent crime going on, you've got a number of things you have to deal with at that point in time. Not just you, but all the officers who are arriving on the scene, correct?
Yes.
First of all, you've got the allegation of somebody's been stabbed, somebody's been hurt, right? Of course, you don't know at that point, other than somebody maybe telling you there's a serious stabbing, you don't know from any personal direct knowledge how serious it is at that point, correct?
What point do you mean? By the time we got to the intersection, there was information being relayed about suspect description and things of that nature.
Okay.
So yes, when I got to the scene, we were getting calls and getting information over the radio, giving us more information than what I initially had when I was responding. Yes.
So by the time you got there, calls have been made, other officers have arrived, information is being passed along, and you're receiving some of that information in the car.
Yeah, I've received information from, as I said, when I exited the car, from people, because there was people out and about, people that were on the porch where the victim ran to, gave us information. We had information coming over the radio, and obviously, like I said, I was not the first officer there, so I was getting information from multiple sources at that point.
Right. And when you got to that corner, and when I say got to the corner, at this point, it would be fair to say you're not worried about whether or not you're parking the car in a fashion that's impeding traffic. At this point, would it be fair to say that you and the other officers, or whoever's arrived previous to that, they've basically stopped traffic in this area because you don't want anybody coming in and out of the intersection?
I apologize. To my knowledge, we'd pretty much, because I believe there was at least 3 cars in front of me and more were coming. We completely blocked that intersection with vehicles. So
there's no pedestrians or other traffic coming through, civilian traffic coming through. This is all emergency and police vehicles coming in at this point.
At that point, it wasn't completely blocked off when I arrived, because immediately I turned to the right and went back to the Mrs. Hahn's residence. But when I got there was at least 3 or 4 in the roadway. I don't believe, based on what I remember, that anybody could have passed through.
Okay. And that's for a variety of reasons. For one thing, if there is a suspect in the region, you guys are trying to create what is known as a perimeter, right? You're trying to get an area so that if there is a he, or at this point you don't even know he or she on the suspect, correct? When you first arrived.
What do you mean when I first arrived? Like when I
had there been a description of a male suspect?
It actually came over to call eventually, even with his name, the defendant's name. I don't even know exactly when it was. When we got to Rainwater and Tillwood, and when we exited the call, that's when all information started flowing.
Okay.
That's when we could also tell by the officer, because we see people with broken noses, see people with injuries all the time. I could tell by the officer's reaction over the radio, which is something other officers, people you work with every day, you know how they sound when normal stress versus, okay, something was bad. So immediately as we were getting out of that car, that's when we really started getting a lot of information. We were getting suspect information. I was hearing the officers' voices, knowing it was bad. I remember him asking for EMS in a way he usually would not ask for EMS. So at that point, right before we stopped, or right as we're getting out, that's when all the information really started coming in.
And did they give you a physical description of the suspect?
Yes, they did.
Heavy set, balding, and things of that nature?
Yes, sir, they did.
And you had a name, you think, at that point?
At some point, information was given on a name, yes.
Can't say for certain, as you said here today, when that was given, but you do
No, sir.
recall getting it at some point.
It did come out, and it was in the call with his name. But at that point, my adrenaline obviously went up a little bit, and I was proceeding towards the house. So I don't know. I remember getting his physical description. I remember exactly what he looked like prior to ever calling him out of the house, but I don't know when I got his name or anything like that.
And that's what I was saying. When you got out of the car with Officer Hervey and you started to head down toward Tealbriar, which is on the western side of Rainwater.
Yes, sir.
You see, and now you're seeing this person with, you said, the hands that almost looked like they were mummified, where they were bandaged up.
As I was walking towards the crime scene, at that point I was getting, Officer Fetzer was giving information, Riley was giving information, people that were on the porch were giving us information. That essentially at another crime scene, or it's that way. It's two doors down.
Across Rainwater over on the Tealwood side.
Yeah, I didn't even, at this point I don't even realize they're different streets. He just says, the one guy that had the wrap around his hands was saying, he's 2 doors down. We're immediately getting information over the radio that additional crime scene was 2 doors down. So we're getting a lot of information that 2 doors down.
Exactly. And that, you said at the time that the person with the wrapped hands was talking, you didn't even know who that individual was.
I still don't.
Okay.
I assume who it was, but I
assume it's Mr. Hahn.
I assume, but
But that's today.
But that's today. I didn't know then. I like I said earlier in my testimony, I still haven't met Mr. Hahn. Exactly.
And as you said, there's a whole lot of information being given into you at this time, right?
As I was I wasn't at this point, now that I'm out of the car, I'm not getting any additional information over the computer. But yes, I was getting a lot of information over the radio, and I was also, most people were on that porch that I recall off the top of my head. There was a few, I had officers walking around, and I believe there was also a few citizens that maybe had come out during the commotion, but I don't remember those too well. But yes, I was getting information from people on the porch, people on my radio at that point.
Now, one of the pieces of information that was passed along to you at that time was that there was someone thought they had seen the suspect running in an easterly direction away from the crime scene.
We did there was some confusion on where he could be initially, yes.
And if that's the case, then that suggests that there's somebody potentially on the loose who has, based upon your assessment of the situation, committed a very violent crime against somebody. And now you have you had this concern all the time, but when you get to the crime scene, it's not just about finding the guy who did it. It's also about, you've got all these citizens that are around you, and they have to be protected as well, correct?
Yes, sir.
You mentioned yesterday, this is a residential neighborhood, lots of homes. Certainly, would you agree this is not the type of thing that happens in this neighborhood with any kind of frequency?
No, it is not. I do not get many, outside of maybe some traffic running stop signs. I don't go to that neighborhood for much.
This is like Main Street, USA area. This is, people raise their kids here.
Yes, it's a very nice neighborhood with statistically low crime.
When So you're out of the car. You got a recruit with you. You got this guy with bandaged hands telling you suspect down there. You got an officer telling you suspect maybe running eastward.
We were given. Oh, I apologize. I'll let you finish.
You and your fellow officers, just based upon your training, I'm not asking you what another officer did unless you saw them do it, but you know that from your training, and basically the training you got to become a police officer is essentially the same academy training that all the police officers get, right?
Within the Raleigh Police Department, yes.
Yeah. We got to make sure people are safe, and if this person is on the loose, we got to get that person. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. So, and you don't know at that point where the person is.
I've gotten some information, yes, that he could possibly. I'd gotten on the radio and said, hey, after we got information that he could possibly run. There's also some information that said he could possibly be in the house. So at that point, I got over the radio and said, set up, because now that the serious is, everybody knows it's serious. All of Raleigh officers know it's serious. So at that point, I started. We had enough units on scene to handle the house. So at that point, I got over the radio and said, additional responding officers, I need you to circulate basically next neighborhood streets down, put in a wider perimeter just to make sure nobody was running.
Right. Now, this, thank you for saying the wider perimeter.
Yes, sir.
Wider perimeter, if you got a runner, and that's an if, that's the thing on this job. When you have to go into this, you have to be prepared for all possibilities, correct?
Yes, sir.
Which is why they give you the training, so that you can sort of have protocols on how to deal with it, right?
Yes, sir.
It helps to deal with situations when you have protocols in place because the protocols have proven to be useful, correct?
Yes, sir.
The protocol in this instance is you got a runner, so you might have a runner, so you got to be on the lookout for the area to see if there's somebody around and about, correct?
Yes, sir.
And obviously you'd be looking for someone meets the description of Mr. Broyhill that had been passed along, correct?
Yes, sir.
You'd be looking for possibly signs of someone who might have blood on their clothes or something of that nature, or carrying a weapon, right?
Yes, sir.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but if you saw any of the neighbors in the houses adjacent to 1705 Tealwood, whether across the street, down the street, and saw them coming out to look, you'd be ordering them, get back in your homes. Would that be fair?
We didn't at that time. At that point, all I was focused on was getting that house. But yeah, had somebody had been near the house, I'd have ordered them. You need to step back. Yes.
Because you don't know what you're going to.
Yes, sir.
You don't know what kind of weapon this person might have. You don't know what their intentions are. You don't know what they might try to do to any one of you, correct?
Yes, sir.
This is the danger of being a police officer.
Yes, sir.
And this is like the worst scenario. You're going into the unknown.
Yes, sir.
When you say the wider perimeter, may I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Yes, sir.
Actually, I just want to approach the schematic. Again, you don't know if there's runners, but you mentioned that when you came back over here from Tealbriar,
Yes, sir.
now you're heading over toward Cross Rainwater to the Tealwood area. Now, the Hahn's house is here. It's the second one in from the corner, right?
Yes, sir.
This house here faces Rainwater, correct?
If
you know.
There was a house there. I don't know which way it faced.
Wasn't your focus, you were told possibly 1705 Tealwood,
Second house on the left is what I was told.
where the suspect would be.
Yes, sir.
All right. Now, you talked about some trees that you got behind.
Yes, sir.
Basically, for protection, give you some kind of thing. You don't know that this guy's got a gun, right?
Yeah, I didn't know any. We knew of a stabbing, but we didn't know any other weapons. Or anything.
Right, and I think I recall you saying that after you got the notice to go back and might have a suspect running and might be in the house. I think that was when, correct me if I'm wrong, you went back to the cruiser and got the rifle.
Well, since my cruiser, I kind of was passing my cruiser after I made the left on Tealbriar. As I started to walk towards the Hahn residence, it was on the way.
Right.
So I popped in, opened my trunk, and retrieved my patrol rifle.
Sure. Officer Hervey, did he get one, or was he using his?
He has not. He's still too new. He's not.
No, we don't give him the rifle yet.
No,
Okay.
yes, sir.
I don't mean that in a funny
Oh,
way.
no, that's no problem.
But that's part of the training.
Yes, sir.
Don't do things you're not ready for.
Yes, sir.
And you're probably, not to make your job any tougher than it was, you got that on your mind too. You got a trainee with you.
Yes, sir.
Who doesn't have the experience you have at that particular moment in time.
Yes, sir.
So you're also thinking about this guy. I don't want to do anything that gets this guy in danger either, right?
Yes, sir.
You grab the rifle, and let's talk about the perimeter. Somebody put something out over the radio that they thought he might be in the house, right?
We got multiple information. We've been told information that he could be in the house. Did have some conflicting information. He could be running. We didn't know either one.
Now you stationed yourself at this tree that you've described. It's not in the schematic, but there's a tree somewhere you said near the end of the driveway.
Between those two houses, there's basically shrubbery and trees that separate them.
Give me a moment.
Yes, sir.
Can I see the photographs? If you would take a, can you put this one up? Sorry, I got it.
States 22, I believe Mr. Arbor's requesting.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, ma'am. Right here. All right.
That's the house, right?
Yes, sir.
That's 1705 Tealwood.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now you positioned, and I think this was the picture, and if I can, these other ones. Yeah, this was. You don't need to put it up, but this is states 25. That's another one for the driveway, correct?
Yes, sir.
This one, I think this is the one, states 22, that you said you can't see it in the picture, but if it were a little wider angle, it would be just to the other side of the driveway. There's like some trees or bushes or something like that. That is where you positioned yourself behind.
Yes, sir.
And I can't remember where you said Herbie was. Where was Officer Herbie? Was he with you?
It was known immediately. He was still pretty new at that point that I was taking command. He was just following behind me. So the whole time he was right behind me at all times.
Okay. Can we put the schematic back up? You still got the hard copy picture 22 in front of you?
Yes, sir.
Good. Okay. So there's two. So you and Hervey are over here, but you testified yesterday, and you just testified a minute ago. Setting up the wide perimeter means because you can't. Even though you've gotten some more information, it sort of leads you to believe or suspect that someone's in the house. You can't discount the possibility that they might have gotten out of the house, right?
Yes, sir.
So even though you're positioned yourself in a place where you can see both, I think you said the front door to the Hahn's residence and the side door going into the Hahn's residence, would be fair to say that you and your other officers are also looking around because you got to keep an eye on what's going on around you.
No, not at that point. I'd gotten over the radio. At that point, we had a lot of officers coming to us. I have no idea the amount, but a majority of the north side of Raleigh was coming to that scene.
Okay.
I'd gotten over the radio briefly, stated, hey, he could have possibly ran, get to all the additional, I don't remember, I cannot remember exactly what I said, but basically get to all the additional side streets, let's post up on there. At that point, when I was at the tree, myself, Officer Morrow, Officer Clausweller, and Officer Hervey was behind me. There were additional officers there, like Officer Fetzer, Sergeant Wood. The sergeants
Warren.
were arriving. Yeah, Officer Warren. We became focused on the house. That became our priority.
Somebody, now you're not at a vantage point to see it to yourself, but based upon protocols with which you're familiar with, because this guy could be, you guys are approaching this house with the idea there's a suspect in it,
We knew either there was a suspect in it or it was a crime scene. We were approaching that either way, it had to be secured.
correct. You also can't discount the possibility, anytime you go into an unknown crime scene like that, that if he hasn't already run it, he or she hasn't already run, they may run once you announce your presence there, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. And so your positioning was to the front so that you could monitor that side door and that front door, but there was a back door to that house too, wasn't there?
Yes.
And it went into a backyard, right?
Yes.
Which was fenced, right? If you know.
I know there's a back door. I know there's another officer position back there. I don't know anything about the backyard.
You remember the back door from when you went into the house and did the sweep inside the house?
You could see it behind the I believe were doors, windows like type doors. Yeah,
Those
but
typical sliding glass doors that go off to like a back deck or something.
something of that nature. I don't know exactly, but yeah, I
Okay.
believe I saw doors. Yes.
So, based upon your experience, there's cops behind the house.
I knew there was cops behind the house.
Okay. That's not a speculation. You know there are.
Officer Clausweller was positioned behind the house.
Okay. And I'm going to ask you to do me a favor. You remember in the picture that's identified as, well, it's shown in State's Exhibit 22, and it's shown. If you could pull up State's 25, please. Thanks. This is the image of State's Exhibit 25. There was this one vehicle, this white vehicle, to the side of the house, closest one in the driveway. As we look at the picture, are those the two steps? Are those steps going to the side door when I'm pointing to right here? These like two brown rectangular things in the picture? If you know.
I do remember him being at an elevated position when he exited the house. I wasn't focused on the actual steps, but yeah, he was in an elevated position and he had to come down steps to my knowledge.
This seem accurate and depict what you recall of that day of the car, the white car being in front of those steps?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then beyond that, there was this second car.
Yes, sir.
I think a darker, I don't know, BMW or something like
Like
that.
an Audi or something. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Because we'll get back to the point of where Mr. Broyhill comes out. But I want you to do me a favor right now, with the court's permission. We got two car lengths there from the door, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. If I could ask the officer to remove himself from the witness stand for a second. Do me a favor. Let's use sort of this open area where behind the bailiff here, okay, as being the side door.
Okay.
The side door of the house where Mr. Broyhill comes out of, okay?
Yes, sir.
All right. Can you remove yourself from the witness stand and first position yourself in the courtroom in a way that shows where you and Officer Hervey would have been, the distance, to the best of your recollection, from the door. So I'll position myself at the door. Put yourself in an area where you think you would have been.
Approximately about this distance.
Okay, so for the record, I'm not going to do any quick math here, but I'm going to. You've left the area in front of the bar of the courtroom. You've gone back into the gallery area against the wall. I don't know. I'll trust your judgment more than mine. What do you think? Maybe 20 yards or something? That looks like some good. I don't know if I could get a first down with that, but I'm just trying to figure it out from there. Anyway, this is the distance, what you're showing from that sign in the back gallery area to here, okay? All right. Now, your position behind a tree.
Not behind. I have a clear. The judge, Your Honor, would be the front door. You would essentially be the side door.
Okay.
And these distances would be a relative active.
Okay, do me a favor. Stay right where you are, because that's where you are with Officer Hervey, okay? Can you pull up State's Exhibit 22. And let me know if you can see it from where you're standing, okay? In fact, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll bring it to you. Give me the hard copy. Okay. Now you mentioned you and Officer Hervey are here. There was, you see along the driveway on the left-hand side, and you've got the picture closer so you can get a better view of it. And what is that on the left side that you can recall? Is it all shrubbery? Is it some kind of like landscaping, some earth or?
Too, I remember there was a couple pine trees, and like you said, there was, mid-sized bushes / trees that appeared to be like used for separation from one home to the next.
Okay. And if I recall yesterday, what you said was one of the officers, I think it might have been Officer Morrow,
Yes, sir.
positioned himself along one of those trees opposite the side door, correct?
To my knowledge, Officer Morrow, yes, in those bushes, he was essentially on the neighbor's side door entry steps, or he was parallel with the neighbor's side entry door.
Okay.
He might have been in the bushes. I don't know exactly where it was, but he was in that area.
And I understand this is 2 years ago, and a lot of your focus is on the two doors, not so much where the officer is. You just know he's there because like you said, you've got officers surrounding this house.
Yes, sir.
All right. So using this area that goes up to the bench area as your designating point, I'd be walking that way toward the bailiff to sort of the area, and you stop me where you think the Officer Morrow or whoever the other officer was positioned to monitor this door. You stop me, okay?
Okay. Stop.
Okay. So now I'm this distance, this officer is this distance away. So you've got a view, front door, in case the person tries to go out there. You got that side door. I got an officer here. We got an officer in the back.
Yes, sir.
Are there officers on the other side of the house?
I know other officers were arriving on the scene. I don't know where they were at that point.
Okay. So there's the two of you over there. There's one here. There's one in the back, and there are possibly more.
More officers were coming. Yes.
Now, was the door ajar?
To my knowledge, yes.
Okay. So the door's open, but you are not, from your vantage point where you can see both doors, you can't see anybody in the door when you first start looking at it.
I can see the door, but I can't see inside the home from the side door.
And you're certainly not seeing Mr. Broyhill.
No, not at that time.
And you don't know what you've got coming out of there.
No, I don't know.
Somebody could come out of there with a gun blazing, for all you know.
Yes, sir.
So everybody's on guard,
Yes, sir.
right? And you don't know where the person is inside the house.
No, we do not.
They could be just inside the door. They could be on the second floor, for all you know.
I knew they weren't just inside the door because me and Officer Morrow were able to. Officer Morrow would have relayed to me, I've got eyes on him. Because he could see inside the home.
And he couldn't see him.
At that point, he couldn't see him, so nothing was relayed to me that, hey, I've already got eyes on him.
That's my point. Nobody can see inside where Mr. Broyhill is when you guys are first setting up the perimeter. You can't see him, correct?
At this time, no.
Right. So now you're trying to alert this person. I'm talking rather loudly right now so that you can hear me, and you're on the opposite side of the room, right?
Yes, sir.
And you're doing the same to talk back for me and so that the jury can hear what you have to say.
Yes, sir.
But you're not talking like this when you're trying to order a suspect out of a house who has just potentially stabbed somebody and who may come out and decide that they're going to, well, you don't know what they're going to do when they come out, correct?
Yes, sir.
One of the police protocols is announce your presence in an authoritative way to let them know who's in charge and to get them to stop whatever they're doing, to let them know, basically, give up. You don't have a chance here.
We don't say anything like that. We announce that we're there.
They don't do it like that.
Let's go ahead and resume our seats.
I'm not done, Your Honor.
Well, let's go ahead and resume our seats.
I'd object, Your Honor, because I'm not done asking what I need the officer to do from this vantage point. I'd be happy to be heard out of the presence.
Well, then let's go ahead and get to that question, and then you can talk about tenor of voice and all those things other times. If you need the positional relationship, let's go ahead and clear those questions up so we can get people back in their proper positions in the courtroom.
Note my objection to being limited on cross-examination, Your Honor. Officer, when you are standing there, you have to say something loud enough for the person inside who you can't see to not only hear you to follow a command, but also to let him know you're there meaning business. Don't try anything if you come out of the house, correct?
We announced that we were there in a loud, clear voice and asked them to exit the home with their hands up.
Can you demonstrate it?
I can, yes.
The way you would have done it that day. Standing from that vantage point, trying to get a word in to an open door over here to a person that you can't even see in the house.
Officer Morrow called him out of the house. I can give you what I said to him when he exited the house.
But everybody's yelling at him to get out of the house at that point. Everybody's yelling commands because you don't know what door the person's going to exit from. Isn't that true?
No, only one person gives commands at a time. If multiple people give commands, it can be conflicting.
You made some records. So, all right, now you can return to your seat. When you were, I'll let you get there. That from the back of the house because you're not there, correct?
Nothing's going to be yelled at the back of the house.
Okay.
Based on training. I mean, Officer Clauswell could have been yelling something, but I didn't hear it. But he's not supposed to based on his training.
This person, whoever it is at that point, because you don't know who it is yet. You don't know it's Mr. Broyhill yet, who's in the house. When you're letting him out, you're not just saying we're giving him commands to get out. You're saying, come out of the house! Come out of the house with your hands up! Right? Something like that.
Officer Morrow instructed him initially, yes.
You guys have guns on him. You have a rifle in your hand.
We were
There's
armed.
an officer in the back. There's an officer to the side of the door. They're trying to yell it loud enough to make sure that the person inside the house can hear it. Come out of the house with your hands up. This is the police. Correct?
Yes, sir.
And after that's happening, with all these officers, with the guns, people yelling to get in, and with Officer Morrow, whatever, in a loud, authoritative voice, the kind of voice, and they actually teach you classes on how to do it at the academy, don't they?
They do.
Because it's a protocol. It's part of the protocols of being a police officer, right?
Yes, sir.
You want to let that person know, come out, don't try anything, because if you do, there's going to be a consequence. Come out safely and you'll be okay.
Yes, sir.
And after some yelling, and not too long of a time, as if I recall correctly, you said, then Mr. Broyhill came to the door, correct?
After Officer Morrow gave approximately 3 or 4 commands, after I saw Mr. Broyhill, there was, it wasn't long before he exited the house.
And your testimony was that when he came to the door, now, where you were standing, you said from you could see, I don't know if it was at that point, but at some point, I think your words were he was saturated in blood.
Yes, sir.
From head to toe.
Yes, sir.
Which suggests to you got a combination suspect-victim. That be fair?
Given the information that I received over the radio, that what the suspect's description, I think even at this point his name had been broadcasted over the radio. And given the fact that he came out covered in blood, I believed he was the primary suspect, yes.
Agreed. You don't, what I'm saying to you is, and this is part of being one of the first police officers at the scene. At that point, when you're ordering him out of the house, nobody's trying to figure out right at that second, how did this all happen? You have other responsibilities that you're dealing with. Get him out, get him secured, secure the perimeter, make sure the community's safe, and as you said yesterday, we don't even know if there's somebody else in the house.
Yes, sir.
You're certainly not thinking about, how did this happen? That's going to come later. That's
Yes, sir.
fair?
Yes, sir.
Sort of part of the way police departments are made up. There are also investigative units that have detectives, like Detective Morse, who come in afterwards, and they have to talk to all of you officers to find out what happened, because you are the first ones on the scene, right?
Yes, sir.
And it would be fair for me to say there were a significant police presence on your arrival, and I think by your testimony, an even larger, more significant police presence by the time, say, Mr. Broyhill was in custody and being tended to.
When I exited the house after the protective sweep, there was a larger police presence than to my knowledge, than when I entered the home.
There are police all around and about this intersection. They are where you are dealing with Mr. Broyhill. There's still people over across Rainwater on the other side in the Tealbriar side. You have the crime scene itself at 1705 Tealwood. You have the neighbors in between. Police are everywhere. You certainly don't know what everybody else is doing, correct?
Yes, sir.
You're just focusing on your responsibilities.
Yes, sir.
When I asked about victim suspect thing, what I'm saying to you with respect to that is, when you have knowledge that there's a stabbing, because that was reported to you over the dispatch when you went to the scene.
Yeah, I was informed multiple ways that there was a stabbing. Officers
Right.
on scene, over the radio, over my MCT. Yes.
Sure. Until Mr. Broyhill came out, you had no idea what the person who would have done that stabbing would have looked like, other than the physical descriptors that had been given to you over the dispatch, right?
I did not know Mr. Broyhill before the stabbing. No.
And
But-
you did not know or had not been given information about whether or not he would have or would not have been covered with blood from head to toe, as you've described what you saw, correct?
I was given his physical description. I was not given that he would be covered in blood.
Right. So when he's coming out of the house, and you and the other officers are seeing him for the first time, he's covered with blood. That doesn't, you don't know you can't make any assumptions just on that. You know this is a stabbing. He could have the blood of somebody else on him, correct?
At that time, given the amount of blood and the seriousness of the stabbing, I believed it was the victim's blood at that time.
Right. But then there came a point where because there comes a point where you said Officer Morrow's yelling out commands, but then you're giving him directions on how to come down the driveway?
Officer Morrow gave the initial commands. When I saw him, no commands were being given when he exited the home.
From you?
No, from anybody. When he'd given initial commands, we don't just keep screaming and screaming. We give a command, break. Give a command, moments of silence. Because if everybody's yelling, it's just creates mass. It's going to be bad. it just creates confusion.
Yeah, and actually, if there might have come a point where if Mr. Broyhill hadn't have come to the door, then you got to go to the next, even more difficult step, which is to actually enter the house, right?
We would have, yes.
Yeah, that's even more difficult because you don't know if somebody's laying in wait in there to attack any of you, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right, but go ahead.
Yeah, at that point, remember I saw him out of the corner of my right eye. I noticed Officer Morrow at that point was not giving commands. So at that point, I took over the commands, and based on Officer Morrow's training, he would if we are trained that as someone is giving commands, because things are dynamic, things change. You might be giving commands at the back door, and the guy come out the front door. He knew immediately as when I gave my commands, he'd give no commands. So at no given point was there more than one officer giving commands.
Okay, so looking at approach witness.
Yes, sir.
Looking at State's Exhibit 22, how far would Mr. Broyhill have gotten out of the door, say, before you started to give your commands to him?
When I saw him out of the right eye, he was just exited the side door.
Was he on the steps?
He was elevated from me. So yes, I believe he was on the steps. I remember him, he was elevated, so I had to look up at him when he stepped out, and it was a moment of maybe a second or two after he had stepped out of the house that I noticed him.
Okay. Now, you can't discount when he's first coming out the door. You don't know whether the individual has a weapon or anything when he's first coming out the door.
When he came out the door, he was extremely cooperative and already had his hands up.
Okay, so he had his hands up.
He was already cooperative, had his hands up. I could see that he had no weapons on. There was no visible weapons on him at that time.
Okay. And your training for you and the other officers is just because you don't see anything doesn't mean you assume there's no weapon, right?
Yes, sir.
Because you don't know that someone's going to reach down and grab something. You keep your guns trained on that individual.
Yes, sir.
Everybody's got their guns trained on him.
To my knowledge, yes, I had mine. To my guess, all the other officers did as well.
That would be the protocol.
That would be the protocol.
When you take over commands, then Officer Morrow backs off. Do you then remove yourself from behind the tree, bush area, so that he can see you with the gun trained on, so that he can see you've got a gun trained on him?
When I ordered him back, I stayed at cover for a majority of the time until he stopped at the car.
Okay, walk us through that. So now, so when you took over verbal commands, he's probably on the steps because he's in an elevated position.
Yes, sir.
Now, Officer Morrow's still there. He's still got a gun on him.
To my knowledge, yes.
Yeah. And there's still officers in the back, and you don't even know who can see him from the backyard at that point, correct?
No, sir.
All right. But you take over. But you take over the commands, but maintain your position of cover. Because, again, you don't know what your safety... Nobody knows what their safety issue is completely yet. He's not secured.
Yes, sir.
And he complies with you. So to tell us exactly, walk us through it. Stand up if you need to look at the picture.
When he exited out the side door, he came up, both of his hands were visible, like so. Completely cooperative. I said, sir, I need you to turn around, walk back to the sound of my voice. He did it immediately.
Now, I just want to stop you with that because, again, we're in a very antiseptic setting in a courtroom. It's not like that. You're yelling at him. You're letting him know you're in charge. He's under cover of police officers. There are guns trained on him. This isn't some conversation. You're giving him orders.
Yes, I was giving him. My voice was elevated, and I was giving him orders.
Sort of like when I was doing it over there. That's how you're doing it to him.
Similar, yes.
Okay.
At that point, I don't remember if I told him to turn around after he came down the steps or at the top of the steps. I do know I told him to turn around because it was in my head. He might have a weapon he could pull at any time. I wanted him to turn around, give us an extra second to react if he did have something. At some point, either on the steps or immediately after he stepped down the steps, I said, turn around. At that point, obviously there was a car. He kind of walked.
Do me a favor. So when you say turn around, so you using me as Mr. Broyhill, if I'm facing out, and this is the door, I came out like this with my hands up,
yes,
with his hands up?
Yes, sir.
So when you say turn around, you wanted him to go like this?
I wanted his back to be towards me.
On the elevated area?
I told him to turn around. I don't know if he took this couple steps and then I told him to turn around. Probably I let him take the steps down because I didn't want him to get injured. At this time, I don't remember if he was on the steps when I told him to turn around. I know as quickly as, and I know it was safe, I told him to turn around so he couldn't reach for anything and put anybody in danger.
All right. Now, you said that all right, walk us through it. So then you're telling, all right, come toward me. You're yelling at him. Come toward me, right?
I said, I'm Officer Smith of the Raleigh Police Department. Turn around from the sound of my voice. Do it now. I finish each command with do it now so they understand.
And just so we're clear, it's like we talked before. Do it now. It's not some nice speech. You're
Yes, sir.
Hey, buddy, do what we tell you to do.
Yes, sir. I'm not screaming, but I'm talking as loudly as I possibly can. I'm saying turn around, walk back to the sound of my voice, do it now. Keep walking back to the sound of my voice, do it now. He was walking slow, and obviously because he was walking backwards and there's the car there, it wasn't straight. It was sort of at, it was kind of like in an angle. He just kind of slowly. When he got to the car, he froze.
Let's be clear. Which car, the white one or the blue one?
It's going to be it appears based on this picture, it's a blue BMW.
Okay, so he had gotten past the white car, and you said sort of walking in this crooked fashion.
Wobbly and not in a straight line, yes.
And again, he's got his back turned to you now.
Yes, sir, he does.
So you don't have as good a view as you're going to get of him in a minute.
At this time, I do not have a frontal view of him at all.
Okay, go ahead.
At that point, he gets to the blue BMW here. He stops there. At that point, I move from my position of the tree, and I start walking closer to him, thinking, all right, this is about ready to be time to place handcuffs on him and secure him. As I'm moving towards him, that's when I start saying, I need you to pull him down to go to the ground.
Okay, let me stop you for a second. So you left the area of the tree. I don't even know if you remember. Did Officer Hervey stay behind, or he did go with you as you're moving?
Officer Hervey was told to stay behind me at all times.
Okay.
What he did, at that point I was focused on him.
Sure.
To my knowledge, he was right behind me.
Yeah, I mean, you're not paying attention to him right now because you're dealing with the suspect.
Yes.
Had you come out? Show us if you can. Can you even show us in the picture how far you've come out?
The tree is not, to my knowledge, like I said earlier, I believe this tape is where the tree is. So I'm, a little bit behind with cover. I come out and I start approaching him when he stops at this blue BMW, the front. He sits on the hood. Sits on the front of the hood. I give him an order or two that he doesn't really respond to, and within seconds is when he collapses.
That's when he collapses.
Yes, sir.
And now you can come out and taking the cover. That's the protocol. Don't assume anything because you don't know. For what you know, the guy could be acting. He could be pretending like he's all wobbly and then all of a sudden pull a gun on you, right?
At that time, yeah. I still, the unknown was still there. It was still present.
Okay. So is it when he collapsed? Is that when? Well, I think you got it straight. Before he collapsed, you had started to come out from behind cover
To order him to prone down, yes.
and he's under. You got him. You got sights on him. You got a rifle on him.
I have my rifle on him, yes.
You got fellow officers, and they've all got their guns trained on them.
I can't tell what other officers did. To my knowledge, they would have.
If they're following the protocol.
If they're following protocol, they should have had their weapons on them, yes.
Okay. All right. And then he's to the front end of the car or the back end of the car when he collapses?
He was on the front of the hood.
Okay.
And within a second or two, he collapses he collapses in this direction towards the grass on this side of the street. And right here is where his, I believe, I don't know whose shoes these are. I believe they're his. But this is in the area about where he collapsed.
On the house side of the driveway?
On the house side of the driveway, yes,
Okay.
sir.
Thanks very much, Officer. Now, when he collapsed, did he collapse on his back or did he collapse on his front side?
At this time, to the best of my recollection right now, he kind of collapsed on his side. I don't know if he collapsed on his front or collapsed on his back. I do know at some point we do get him turned over because I do remember all his injuries, and I remember him being at my feet and observing all his injuries.
That's what I wanted to ask you about. When you looked out, now that you can see him, whether he's on his side or whatever position he's in, you are now in a position. So, as he collapsed, it'd be fair to say, the guns stay drawn from everybody until this guy's secure, right?
Yes, sir.
All right. So you're going with rifle pointed toward him, other officers, weapons pointed on him. You're going toward him, and at some point, you're able to observe that both of his wrists were cut lengthwise, correct? And by that I mean
They were cut vertically.
vertically, meaning going from the palm down along the stretch of the arm, correct?
Down the forearm, yes.
Not one, but both wrists.
Yes.
You said these were very deep wounds that you observed.
They were extensive, yes.
You saw like flaps of skin on each side flapping. In fact, I think in a later interview with you did do an interview with the district attorney's office sometime in December in preparation of possibly having to testify in this trial, correct?
I did.
And when you did that, you remember saying something along, it was almost look as though his arms had been filleted.
Yes.
You said yesterday that there was a stab wound to his stomach, correct?
There was.
You could actually see his intestines protruding from the stomach.
I'm not a doctor, but I believed it to be his intestines, yes, sir.
You gave an interview back in, it might have been January of last year, where you remembered his injuries. In fact, the word you used was grotesque.
They were.
Now, you went in the house
Yes, sir.
after he secured. Now, a question about that, because the wrists were so badly cut. What'd you do about cuffs?
I entered the house. I'm not going to be able to testify. To my knowledge, cuffs were never on him.
Would have been hard to put them on, right?
As we approached, I remember both my sergeants basically saying, whoa, like, whoa, when they saw the extent of the blood and the extent of his injuries, because they were going to put cuffs. They hesitated when they saw the extent of his injuries. And then that's when I focused back on the door, but I do remember conversations of, we got to get EMS.
I mean, typically, the protocol, when you've got a suspect of a crime, at least this suspect, Mr. Broyhill, has been successfully removed from the home, and you've got him in a position where he is now on the ground. The protocol is get that individual secure, because until he's secure, nobody knows what that person is capable of doing. Nobody knows whether he's got a weapon. Nobody knows whether he's going to try something. You want to get a suspect secured with handcuffs or some kind of restraints, typically.
In this situation, this was...
I'm not saying this situation. I'm saying generally, if you have a suspect apprehended, you want to get them secured so that they're not a danger to the other officers or yourself, correct?
In others' calls, when a suspect exits, everything's based on the dynamics. Sometimes there are very big men, 300 and 400 pound men that we arrest that cannot be secured with one pair of handcuffs. There's always a dynamic. To give you a protocol, yes, in most situations we do secure the suspect immediately, but there's always, it's a dynamic, free-flowing job. There's always different circumstances.
This ended up being one of those dynamic, free-flowing days because Mr. Broyhill's injuries to his wrists were very significant, correct?
They were.
And at least at that point, he was not doing anything overtly to any of the officers there that would suggest he was a danger to you at that point.
As I testified earlier, he was calm and cooperative during my entire encounter with him.
But you never let the guard down, do you?
No, sir.
Even like when you mentioned yesterday, even when he was in the ambulance, you don't let your guard down, do you?
No, sir.
You know that it's been reported to you that this person has been involved in a stabbing incident. So based upon the information you've been provided with, he's attacked at least one person, possibly two, and he's a potential danger to others, correct?
Yes, sir.
Now, so when you're with him, at least in the time you're with him, you don't let your guard, you said that in the ambulance, you don't let your guard down with him because you can't assume he's not going to do something, correct?
Yes, sir.
So you've got to be attentive to that individual because you don't know what he's capable of. You don't know this guy. You never met him before that day, right?
No, I did not.
And that even if it was someone you knew, that wouldn't matter. If you knew that they'd just been involved or alleged to have been involved in a significant act like this, your training, your experience, the protocols you employ is don't let your guard down. Don't let this, don't stop being a police officer for 1 minute, right?
On our training, we treat every person that we arrest the same. But yes, you're exactly right. We are trained to always keep our guard up, prepare for the worst case scenario.
Now, there does come a point where you testified that you did leave from the area where Mr. Broyhill was outside the house because you're not done. You don't know that the situation is safe yet.
Yes, sir.
That's not just you, that's all the officers, right?
Yes, sir.
You don't know what's in the house. You mentioned yesterday, we don't know if there's another suspect in the house, correct?
Yes, sir.
We don't know if there's another victim in the house, right?
Yes, sir.
So you've got to employ all these same protocols in there as well. So when you're going into the house, you're not just, this is not some casual stroll into the house. You still got, everybody's got guns drawn. Everybody's being attentive. You're making sure no one's going to pop out of a closet or a corner or come up from behind a couch or something. You guys are on alert.
Yes, sir.
You get into the door of the house. Can I have the schematic put up on the screen? I think it's State's Exhibit 16. Can I put it here?
Yes.
Sorry. You enter, you and who other officers came in with you at the same time? There were 4 of you, right?
To my knowledge, at this time, it was Officer Warren, Officer Morrow, Officer Hervey, and myself.
So Warren and Morrow, when you exit in the side door, start sweeping to the left into the kitchen area?
Officer Morrow and Officer Warren, both went straight. I don't know how they committed their protective sweep or anything like that. I immediately made a right turn into the dining room. That was me and Officer Hervey. I do know that.
All right. So when you went right, you went toward the front of the house.
Yes, sir.
And then there would be the southwest corner of the house is where the dining room is, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. And on the southeast corner of the house is, you mentioned something like it looked like an office area.
Yes, it was. Yes, sir. I believe so. It was an office area.
And then in the middle of it, between the dining room and the office area, was a front door that led to a hallway that went to the back of the house, correct?
If you were to open it, to my recollection right now, if you were to open his front door, the first thing you would see is the hallway leading back to the kitchen and the stairwell upstairs.
Right. You'd come in the door, there'd be a staircase on your left, and basically a hallway right in front of you that would take you to the back of the house where the kitchen area was.
Yes, sir.
So you swept around into the dining room. All of this, by the way, is it's all connected. There's open doorways to get in to all 4 parts of this first floor.
Like I said, I don't know what Officer Warren, Officer Marr did. For me, yes, everything was a free-flowing, connected.
Right. When you so you go into the dining room, and at some point, this is not yet the point, but it's also in the back of your mind. Primary directive at this point is make sure no other suspects, make sure no other victims, right?
Yes, sir.
That's the main thing. You know at some point there's the potential that this is a crime scene.
Yes, sir.
there are protocols in place about preserving crime scenes as well, correct?
Yes, sir.
But at that point in time, preservation of the crime scene sort of has to take a back seat to safety of all of you, safety of anybody else in the area. So right now the focus is, let's just see if there's anybody in the house. Let's see if there's anybody involved in the crime. Let's see if there's any other victims of this act, correct?
We're always cognizant of maintaining the crime scene, even as we're doing a protective sweep, but the main priority at that point was to make sure nobody else was injured inside.
Right. Basically the training is, do what you got to do to take care of things. Try not to disturb the crime scene too much if you can do it.
Yes, sir.
So when you're going in the dining room, you come around, you get to that hallway in the center of the house, you check the office area, make sure there's nothing in there, you head back the hallway, and that takes you to that kitchen area, correct?
We go upstairs before we go to the kitchen.
Oh,
area.
you went up the stairs first?
Yes, sir.
All right. Was it just you and Hervey
I-
that went upstairs?
I know me and Hervey did go upstairs. I believe Officer Warren was there. I do remember going back down to kind of collect ourselves. Is everything secure? And so I don't know if Officer Morrow was with us at that point. I don't remember seeing him upstairs right now. I don't know 100%.
Based on your recollection, to the best that you can on that day, the staircase going to the second floor was the only staircase that took you to the second floor in that house, correct?
To my knowledge, yes.
Yeah. When you didn't find anything up on the second floor that caused, certainly no suspects, no victims, right?
Mm-hmm.
In fact, you testified yesterday that eventually when you got done, the house was clear. But there comes a point when you come down the stairs and you go into the back and you see the kitchen.
Yes.
Off to the right would be in the northeast corner of the house is a living room area,
I believe so.
like opposite the kitchen.
I believe so.
Okay. But you remember the kitchen.
I remember meeting the officers in the kitchen and saying, "Is everything secure?" Because at that point we know we needed to get out of the house since everything. And once we all determined that it was secure, we immediately got out of the house.
Approach the witness, Your Honor.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Exhibit 24 put up on the screen, please. You remember saying yesterday? You remember seeing this exhibit yesterday,
Yes, sir.
which is in evidence. When you looked at it yesterday, you said that other than the placards that were put out by the probably the CCBI, the City and County Bureau of Identification, it essentially accurately reflected the scene that you saw when you made your way to the kitchen. Correct?
Yeah, it's a different viewing perspective.
I was just going to get to that. This is sort of coming. This is the schematic, just this one. Oh, that's schematic. Thank you. Let's sort of put this. Actually, we don't need the whole thing. You just went through it. When you go in the front of the house and you're coming up that hallway, you'd actually be coming toward where that chair is that's knocked over.
Okay.
That's the area that you're coming in, correct?
If so, you're saying that the front door is back.
Sort of like if you'd be coming from, can't do it with the screen, but if you'd be coming from, but see where the corner wall is where the dog dish is?
Yes, sir.
And how the wall makes a turn to the right?
That's
the hallway that goes down to the front door. That's where you're coming in from, correct?
okay. Yes, sir. Then that would be the position that I came in through.
Right. And then, as you came into that scene, so this is what you're seeing here, different vantage point, but this is what it's sort of accurately depicted what you did see there that day.
It is.
And by the time you're getting to the kitchen, if you've already been upstairs, and other officers have been through the house, at that point you know it's secure.
Yeah, we all did meet kind of right in that hallway area. I don't think we were in the kitchen because we were afraid that was the crime scene. I do remember having that perspective. I remember looking in, I could see it. And I remember speaking to them, okay, are we good or is everybody secure? Yeah, we're good. I said, I think everything's clear, we got to get out of here. And I immediately exited.
Exactly. When you're satisfied, and when I say you, I mean you, the department, when all the officers that are there are satisfied, we're safe. We get this location is safe. Now the protocol changes to preserve the crime scene.
Yes, sir.
All right. So try not to disturb things.
Yes, sir.
So what you're seeing in this picture is, you can't speak to what other Officer Morrow or Officer Warren did, but for the most part, they have the same training you have. They would have been doing the same thing, trying to secure but trying not to disturb the crime scene. This is what you saw.
Yes.
You had blood all over this room, all over the kitchen area.
Yes, sir.
The chair's knocked down.
Yes, sir.
The blood is not just, I'm sorry, can I approach you again?
Yes.
It's not just in one location. There's blood splatter on the chair, correct? Near the chair?
I see that blood there. I just remember seeing blood. I do remember seeing the knife near the blood. I'm not going to be able to tell you exactly every aspect of where I saw the blood.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I anticipate there'll be other witnesses that'll testify about this, because that's sort of the other protocol. There comes a point where there are people known as identification officers, right?
Yes, sir.
That's their job. Come in and identify the crime scene more specifically. I'm just asking your recollection that day, because you're one of the first responders.
Yes, sir.
This was a bloody crime scene.
It was.
It was all over this room.
Yes, there was blood everywhere. Yes.
Let's take it down, please. When you made the determination, you and the other officers, and just so we're clear, and this is also, you guys are trained to do this. I mean, sort of like the military, police departments do have rank. There's officers, there's sergeants, there's different things. But when you're on the crime scene, you guys that go in as the first responders, part of your training is also how to work together, correct?
Yes, sir.
Can't have one person necessarily going off and being a cowboy, because that can disrupt the protocols, right?
We're all trained in similar methods. Yeah. We're all trained in the same method, and nobody's supposed to deviate from it based on training.
For all the reasons we're talking about, safety, evidence preservation, all that.
Yes.
So now, when I say you make the determination, I meant you and the other officers.
Yes, sir.
Okay, we're safe. Let's lock this down. Meaning, let's get this thing secure so that when the ID people come in, they can start to identify, and we're not doing anything to compromise the scene.
No. Yes, sir. Yeah, we were very aware that this was a serious offense, and we didn't want to do anything to jeopardize that. That's why we got out as quickly as possible.
Exactly. That's when you exit the house, and you went out through the same door?
I went out to the front door.
You went out the front door?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so that got opened up.
Yes, sir.
When you went out, where was Mr. Broyhill?
As I testified earlier, to my knowledge, he was in the Emergency Medical Services truck at that point. I didn't see him at that point.
Okay. So he certainly wasn't laying on the grass anymore.
To my knowledge, he was not.
Okay. And that's all I'm asking, was what you recall.
Yeah. When I came out, the first thing I remember was just, I was kind of not shocked, but my adrenaline was running. And I do remember coming out and just seeing the amount of officers. I remember kind of being surprised at now how many officers were on the scene, and I remember tape being put up. At that time, I did not see Mr. Broyhill.
And I think you said, was Clausweller, was he the one putting up or somebody else?
Officer Horseman was the first person I seen roping off with crime scene tape.
Right. When that happened, and that's just where you are. There's a whole other thing of activity going on the other side of Rainwater, correct?
To my knowledge, there would be, but
you could see all the police lights and cars, and
there was a lot of units on scene when I exited the house.
There comes a point then when you're instructed to ride with Mr. Broyhill in the ambulance on the way to WakeMed.
Yes, sir.
And to the best of your recollection, he was in the ambulance when that instruction was given to you.
When I entered the ambulance, he was already there, and he was already being tended to by Wake County Emergency Services.
And who? I'm trying to remember. Was it Sergeant Wood? Who gave you the instruction to ride into the ambulance?
We got together and we're trying to figure out what to do next. I did speak with Sergeant Wood, who was my sergeant at the scene, and I was like, "Hey, look," because I was training at that point. Technically, Officer Hervey, it's not a rule, but usually he's always supposed to be in the car with me. But I said, in this situation, instead of having to send another officer because there were so many officers already on the scene, I said Officer Hervey could just follow behind me in the EMS. Then that way, when we're through at the hospital, we could just leave. Sergeant Wood said that would be fine. So that's why it was determined that I should ride with Mr. Broyhill.
And there's some logic to that too, right? Because by allowing Hervey, who's a trainee, to drive the cruiser and follow the ambulance, you're not removing another experienced officer from the crime scene location.
Yes, sir.
And Hervey doesn't have the experience that the rest of you have at that point in time.
At that point, he did not.
And it also, because he's riding with you, and he had actually been driving earlier that day, it allowed you, an experienced officer, maybe the same training, but there's a lot of on-the-job training with being a police officer, isn't there?
At that point, I'd been on the streets about seven and a half years, yes.
And
so I had more experience than Officer Hervey, yes.
Fair to say you felt more confident about what you were doing than perhaps Officer Hervey did at his stage of his career.
That'd be a fair
assessment.
At that point. That'd be a fair assessment.
So you knew you could look. In fact, you said this was the worst crime scene you'd been to in your 10 years as you sit here today on the force, right?
I've been to other murder crime scenes. This was the one that stuck with me the most, yes.
All the blood and all the
factors,
all the aspects of it.
Yes, sir.
So you know it's important, and the sergeant knows it's important. They're not going to put Officer Hervey in that ambulance.
No, sir.
They're going to put someone who knows what he's doing. So you got picked. I mean, it could have been one of the other guys too, but you got picked.
To me, the main reason, if I had to guess, was it was just the easiest. It wasn't because we knew we were going to be tied up, that had a car. I was going to have to make arrangements. Now, I mean, when you take that amount of officers and you put them in one location, you essentially have now half the officers for a whole city answering all the calls. It just, from a manpower standpoint, made the most sense. But I think that, I don't know if experience or anything like that came into it. I think it was more just a manpower issue.
And maybe I don't mean to state like, they looked at, I got 10 cops. Smith's the best man for the job. Any one of those of you who are experienced might have been the best man for the job at that particular point in time. You were uniquely available to do it because that way Hervey could drive the car behind you and they wouldn't need him at the crime scene and everything could be accomplished and nothing would really affect what's going on. Someone was going to have to go in the ambulance, correct?
Yes, sir.
Part of the reason why someone has to go in the ambulance is that now that you've got this person in custody, this is protocol, you now become, like all other first responders, you got another role, sort of the potential to be in the investigative part of this. Patrol officers are part of, you're not one of the detectives that comes in afterwards and tries to gather all the information up. But all police officers are, in essence, involved in the investigation of a case, because you have to, whenever you're dealt with anything, find out what you're dealing with, correct?
Yes, sir.
That's why you generate reports. You have to ask questions. You have to find out what's going on. You have to listen to things, if it's appropriate, correct?
Yes, sir.
And if you do anything involved with the case, you have to write a report about it, right?
Yes, sir.
Which you did in this particular instance.
I wrote a supplement. Yes, sir.
Now, I'm going to, you sort of went old school on this report, and I'll explain what I mean. You've been a police officer for about 10 years.
Yes, sir.
Police officers have available to them in their police cruisers now typically a laptop that's built right into the system of the cruiser, correct?
Yes, sir.
You can do something on a case and you can go right into the car and start typing out your report if you want to.
When I'm training, it's not as easily accessible because he has to do his work as well as doing. In most situations when training, I'm not going to be responsible for writing any reports or supplements because that's his job during that time. So because of that, I had the responsibility to write a supplement on this one, but I had to wait through when he was done.
Talking generally, if you weren't training that day,
Mm-hmm.
and you, let's say, had been one of the officers that came on the scene, you didn't have Officer Hervey with you, and you still would have had to do the things you did, you still would have ended up writing a supplement.
Yes.
And if you hadn't had to ride the ambulance, say, to WakeMed, I'm sorry, you still would have had to generate a supplement as to your activities with respect to the apprehension of Mr. Broyhill, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you would have been able to go to your car and do it. You at least have the capability to do that. You can go into the car and start typing it right away, correct?
In this situation, no. In other situations, yes.
Yeah. But the reason I say old school, I'm sure you had some old. And have you had a laptop in your cruiser the entire time you've been an officer with RPD?
I have.
Okay. I'm sure you have some of the old timers telling you about the old days where they used to have to do it on typewriters and stuff, right?
Yeah, and handwritten, yes, sir.
Yeah, those old guys. But
We're going to take a break right now and resume at 11:30. Ladies and gentlemen, so I ask you to recall the instructions I've given you, and I want to focus on one. I know you've heard me recite them a number of times, but I like to every now and then focus on one just to make sure that you understand the significance of it, and that would be the rule not to talk among yourselves. Obviously, you should not discuss the case among yourselves. At this stage in the trial, I'm sure that you've now become familiar with one another and you have conversations among yourselves, and those conversations may stray to things like as innocent as things like commenting on the tie the judge is wearing or something that may be like that, and perhaps that sort of comment doesn't violate the rule. But what I want to just stress to you is that to guard against allowing conversations you might have about yourself to stray into things that may be of a substantive nature about this case. So innocent comments that lead to other observations, things of that sort, may well be violations of the rules. So I just wanted to stress that before you do take a break, and then just remind you of the other rules, not to talk with anyone else, don't form or express opinions about the outcome, no media or independent investigation into these matters, and please have no conversation or communication with parties, witnesses, or lawyers. If you leave your notepads in your chairs, gather at 11:30 and in the deliberation room. Everyone else, please remain seated.